Bit of an echo there. Hello and welcome to the Astropub, your space bar theme to Twitch. Tonight we're doing Galactic Story and Office Hours. This is a newish series. I've got a couple of them in there. These are live streams. So this is not meant as a traditional Galactic Historian. It's not meant as a traditional Captain's Table. It's not meant as my traditional gameplay streams. This is something in between all three. So kind of a place to come in, hang out, discuss, talk Star Citizen lore, so on and so forth. Solar Punch, Fox, Jiru, Starkiller, Mr. Malaka, Dovahking, Sirius, and A Corpse. Welcome, guys. Welcome, one and all. Galactic Restorian. Yeah. Give 3.9, seriously. Like, seriously at this point. I knew it was going to be delayed a little bit, though. Thank you, Ben. Hey, Eagle. And Vegna. Alright, go to the live video and update the thumbnail and everything if I can. There we go. Three dash 31 dash 20. There we go. I'm doing all right. So a lot of people have been reaching out and being like, "Oh shit, is everything okay?" Because it was Friday, I think, or Thursday, last Thursday. I let everyone know that Cam had symptoms of corona, and I didn't think it was corona. Cam really didn't think it was corona, but she has anxiety, and there was a lot of other issues going on. So she's like, so. She, we called the doctor, told them the symptoms, and the doctor's like, we even said the doctor's like, she has allergies, and she has asthma. So both of those combined, when you get serious allergies here in Austin, you know, it can cause debilitating effects similar to corona. And our doctor was like, yeah, that sounds about right. Monitor your temperature. As long as your temperature doesn't go up, you should be fine. But once all of this shit is over with, go get tested for corona. Just see if you had it. That way we know if you have the antibodies or not. Because there are some lasting side effects that they've been seeing from people who've recovered from corona, like issues with the upper respiratory stuff and such. So, her temperature dropped over the weekend. So she's back into normal range. So it's nothing serious, which we thought it was. But I wanted to thank those of you guys who were reaching out and asking if it was okay. Because she's okay. Everything's fine. But the doctor did quarantine her for 2 weeks just in case. As long as you don't have the fever, it's not the beer. Hey, I know you guys are probably going to have topics. No, you feel free to ask. So there's no topics individual that I choose for this. Feel free to just talk, ask questions. That's what this is for. Office Hours is designed for you guys to come in, ask questions, spark up discussions, talk about lore, talk about Star Citizen, kind of everything. But I was curious, since I'm fairly new, if you have any idea of what's up with some ships labeled as wayfinders or explorers not being able to scan mineable. That's because they haven't updated the scanning systems. We know that scanning is a huge deal in Squadron 42, in the vertical slice of Squadron 42. They explicitly mentioned they had to upgrade the scanners for your ship since the previous encounter, which we didn't see on screen, to find the OMC. So we know that scanning is a thing in in Squadron 42, and that detailed scanning or different types of scanning is going to be important. So the reality is just scanning hasn't been modified yet. They haven't really looked into it, or they really haven't changed it yet. So the reason why some things can't scan for mineable is mostly just this is a theory. This is nothing they've said specifically, but that they just haven't bothered changing it yet. Now, some ships can currently do that. I believe the Terrapin can scan for mineable, and the Red can scan for mineable. But the Aquila, okay, the Connie variant, the Beta, the Carrack. I don't think that many of them can pick it up yet. But I think that's a planned feature in the future. What's my who's your favorite cat then? I can't. Cam is my favorite cat. For those of you guys who don't know Cam, who haven't watched her streams and stuff like that in the past, I joke that she's an anime character because she really is, like in many ways. But yeah. The only pub still open. Yeah, Jack, you know it. Big question about Star Citizen and RSI in game. Why didn't CR do the voice for the onboard computers for RSI ships? I don't know. Now, in lore, Chris Roberts, the character, died hundreds of years ago. So that, but I could have seen him do like the Majel Barrett kind of thing. What I really I'm wondering is thinking of the Majel Barrett with Star Trek. Thinking of that, why didn't they have Sandy do the voices, his wife do the voices for all the RSI ships? Because that would have fit well with that Star Trek, kind of like a little nod towards that direction. Let's see. Doctor of the Astropub is doing a great job with his clinic of one. Keep the work. Thank you, man. What do you think of the next what would be the next concept ship? It's going to be likely an origin ship based off of the leaks they've talked about, and probably an exploration ship, and probably the 400i. So it'll be the 400 series. It's going to be an exploration ship, maybe an exploration ship / combat ship. I don't know. Oh, you know what I'd kill for? If the 400i was basically the fucking Defiant from Star Trek. I've been doing a lot of Star Trek. I'm sorry, my brain's been in Star Trek recently. It's like, oh yeah, it's an exploration scout ship with big ass guns. I mean, that's kind of what the Corsair is, but the 400 is going to be more like the Freelancer size. So that crushes BioShock, if I recall correctly. Yes. Terrapin, Reliant Sen, Cutlass, Red Reclaimer, Prospector, and Mole can all scan. You're right, Lou. But the Prospector, and the Mole were supposed to do it because they're mining ships. I think the question was more about why can't all ships do it, or other ships do it, like exploration ships? Why couldn't they scan for it? Not all of them can. Oh, I have a 315P and Aquila, and they can't. So the Aquila can't, and 315 can't, but just making a lot of sense because those things should. Because the Sen and the Terrapin and the Red do. Yeah, there was actually a lot of, if you want to know what's going on, CIG drops a lot of hints and lore in their like their preview stuff and that kind of stuff. And the last thing they talked about was news from New Austin and Terra, which is the headquarters of Origin, is that there's been a lot of ICC, people from the ICC hanging around Origin's plant. And for those who know what the ICC is, it's the interstellar cartographers. They're the people who do map jump points and maintain maps of, or Imperial cartographer. They maintain the maps of the Empire. So not just the jump points, but also maintain updated maps and star charts for everything. So because they said that, it's likely going to be, and the only variant, or the only size ship that Origin hasn't done. They have the 100, they have the 300, which is the 100 and 300 are about the same, but 100 is a starter, 300 is more of an advanced. They already have a ground vehicle, the X1, and they have a 600, which is more of a large ship. It's the Connie size up, and they have the 890, which is an 890, which is a capital class ship. So the only type of ship they haven't done yet is a medium ship, the size of the Freelancer, and the 400i fits well with that. You know, because we already have the 300, we have the 600, but we don't have the 400 or 500. So 400 sounds a little bit better as kind of a medium. That's why my theory, and a lot of people have similar theories. Hey, Massa, how you doing, buddy? Mercury's in 4.1. It is, yes. I asked the same question in Spectrum Star Citizen forums. Why doesn't Sage just flip the switch on exploration ships to scan minables? I think it's just because they are working on scanning tech, and they forgot to plug it in. They should just flip the switch and just make it easy for now. But that's just something they probably haven't cared about or thought about recently. Well, you'd want to have the exploration ships be able to scan for everything, because the exploration ships are designed to do that. So the exploration ships, at the very least, should be able to scan for minerals. They should be able to scan ships. They should be able to scan phenomena, planets, asteroids, whatever. That's their job. And something like a Terrapin, which is literally a wayfinder, its job is to scan for hostile and for, like, it's like a military exploration ship. So it's designed to scan and collect a lot of data and send it back to the fleet. So you'd want those sort of ships to be able to work. But, like, you wouldn't expect the 300i or the Hornet to be able to scan for rocks. It's just not in there, not what they're designed to do. No, they don't have an exploration rover. That was the Lynx, and the Lynx is a upgraded version of the Ursa. It's just an it was a at one point mentioned as a luxury version of the Ursa, which is an RSI rover. I'd love a bigger Argo cargo ship. That would make sense. It would also fit within the realm of how Argonautics works. Astronautics. Astronautics. Nautics. Likely like an interior pressurized ship, something similar to the Caterpillar. Ooh, I could see something. You take the Caterpillar in terms of like modular bays, but you don't have like anything else but the cargo bays. But you drop off the cargo bays like you do with the Carrack. They just kind of like fly down and drop it. Space Above and Beyond's drop ships. Something like that. I could see that working pretty cool. Question, do you think the Kurthok actually have numerous systems and the Xi'an are just keeping a lot of misinformation from UEE? Yes. Why wouldn't would the Kurthok not have multiple systems? They should. We know that in lore, during it's like the Dark Ages or something like that. It's like the dark time when the Kurthok murdered half the entire Imperial family in one swipe. The Emperor who took over stopped exploration towards the Kurthok systems and went the other way for exploration because they were pushing out in one direction. So just so they could avoid the Kurthok. And them moving the other direction ended up having them hit humanity. Hitting the UEE. That's the reason why they went into the UEE, was because they started exploring the opposite direction they were normally going. And to put in kind of as a explanation, again, I've been watching a lot of Star Trek and delving into a lot of lore for the Star Trek series I do on Saturdays. The MMO, god damn it, tabletop RPG, which you should be watching. Saturdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. my time, Central. But to use that kind of as an example, the Federation didn't really push into the Beta Quadrant after like the TOS era of Star Trek. The Beta Quadrant, and that's because that's where the Romulans and the Klingons are. So they pushed mostly into to fill out the Alpha Quadrant and then also explore the Gamma and Delta quadrants eventually. But even in like up to the most recent era of Star Trek, the Beta Quadrant is mostly unexplored because they had a lot of pushback. That's where the Klingons were. That's where the Romulans were. Why fuck around with that? Like, and that's the same kind of idea. It's like, why fuck around trying to explore areas where we know we might run into the Krthok when we have this big empty space we haven't explored at all? Just go that way. That's kind of how they ended up running into humanity. And likely the Xi'an also have a much bigger empire than humanity. We just don't know about it. There's large sections of Xi'an space we have no fucking idea about because they haven't told us. Wouldn't that potentially have an equal chance of being origin reveal they have hinted at? That's what we talked about. No, because, I mean, they could. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Everyone, I think, put too much stock to ears to the ground kind of thing. Because they already have a ground vehicle, which is the X-1. So I wouldn't see them, and they seem to not want to do the X-1 right now, so I don't know why they'd want to do more rovers. It also wouldn't make a lot of sense, unless they're planning on, well, I guess they could do a rover, their own rover for the 600i variant, for the 600i exploration variant, so they can like make a special edition and then resell the 600i with a new skin. I mean, that doesn't, I mean, I could see them more filling out the ships with the 400i. But yeah, we'll see. What's a reporter ship for? The Reliant variant. In lore, it's designed as a ship that has a dedicated camera and can broadcast signal, so it has like broadcasting equipment and a camera. But in practicality, they don't really know. They've kind of mentioned the idea of being able to broadcast video across the game, so to other places. Just theorizing myself about what they might do with that in terms of gameplay is being paid to go scoop out a place. So you go get some footage of this area that, you know, you got a hot scoop, you need to go take this camera and go record it. But with the Reliant, it's just like boom, boom, I can send it out real quickly. I don't even have to fly back to where I need to go. Something like that. But I don't really know, and I don't think CIG really knows. Hey, why not? Space Bros. What's the name of the Bengal class supercarrier in the Junktown Wars? What's the name of it? There's no name for that one that we know of. We don't know which Bengal was the one that was sent to Stanton. We do know is that it was we do know it was an offhanded mention that they put in a Bengal. They threw a Bengal at them. Tumbler Cyclone RN can scan for minorables. Oh, that's cool. You know that. Yeah. I love the Argo. A lot of people like the rugged Argo look. The Vulcan should be moved to Argo. I agree. I think the Vulcan should be an Argo ship rather than an Asia ship. It makes a lot more sense. You could also push the Argo, in lore, push the Argo astronautics lore to being that's their first ship that they made to service, to basically fill in a space that was missing during the Empire. Which I thought I'd heard about. Which about the rover? Yeah, no, the Lynx is what they were talking about in the past, and the Lynx was still a modified Ursa. Grr. And I think that was also coming in with a Phoenix. The Lynx was supposed to come with a Phoenix, and then they talked about the Lynx also coming with a 600i. So if this ever gets released, my plan is to find someone with a capital ship and get them to crew it. You need a lot of and help them crew it. That's a good idea. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of need for it. Right now, there's too many captains, not enough crew. I'd rather have a 400i, to be honest. I mean, I think the 400i would work better. You could sell more. You could make more money because you could price point its origin, so it's going to be higher than the Freelancer. But if you put it at like $160, $180 for a 400i, making it as a luxury competitor to the Freelancer, yeah, I'd see some people buying it, especially if you're just like, yes, luxury meets practicality. Put 2, 3 size 4 cannons on that thing, gimbaled. You know, make it a mini Connie, essentially, in terms of firepower. People would buy it. Maybe they're doing a cargo mover. I mean, that's something they're going to need. I don't think the Origin cargo mover, it has air conditioning and an ice maker as you're putting your cargo across the cargo bay. The whole point is not to do every ship / vehicle. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. As much as I've been banned for I don't know, and I do know this game and care. Thus, I study aspects of it to help point out the flaws in design and help improve it. I don't know where that comes from, but okay. Question: are there rivalries and conspiracies in the high ranks of the UE Navy? Define era. Yes and no. The Navy is involved in some shady shit during the Mezzer era, and they've done some shady shit since then. Personally, I have a feeling that Bishop isn't on the up and up, and there was a lot of contention between Bishop and some of the other and the Senate, especially since the UEE Senate was about to defund the Navy. Because it was like, hey, we're running out of money for the rest of the Empire. Let's pull some money from the fucking military. We're spending too much money. And then suddenly the Vandal attack and all that money gets thrown back into the military. Wonder why. So that's a conspiracy theory that's run around. What's the chance of an actual human civil war that causes 2 different human factions? Pretty high. Chris Roberts specifically mentioned that in that's part of the long-term goals for Star Citizen in terms of the story plot lines. A split between Terra and Earth, similar to the split between the Eastern and Western Roman Empire, because he used the Roman Empire as a big kind of example, as the kind of basis for it. Now, you got to remember that there's a basis, and then there's making it make sense with what they have. The UEE is not the Roman Empire. It just simply uses the Roman Empire as its initial starting point, and then it's kind of spread it out and fixed that. It's part Space Rome, part Space EU, and part Space US. It's a lot of different things. But so yes, it's a highly likely, if not inevitable, that's going to happen in this game. So today's lore starts the launch of guilds we can join. Then I haven't read the story, but I'm imagining it's them fleshing out the idea. Usually they use the stories to kind of flesh out more of an idea. Like the one before was to flesh out the fall of the Olympus, to flesh out the Tavaran characters, like the characteristics of the Tavaran, because the pirate who was in charge of the Olympus is Tavaran. To flesh out more of the stories around the UEE, because especially this is a post-Second Tavaran War UEE. So this is the UEE at the height of its power in terms of ain't nobody but the Xi'an gonna stop them sort of situation. Mezzer the second was emperor. Like we're talking like just off of the first Mezzer. Humanity is fucking invincible. History theory question here. In the back of my mind, another alien race is pushing the Vandal, which is why they're now fighting humans. This unknown race has been hinted at by one of the other alien races. This is the correct way. It's in mirror theory crafting. The Kathak is what you're referencing, and yes, there's a lot of belief that because the writers use the Roman Empire as the basis, as the starting point for everything, and it's a little more obvious in the naming, because for the bad guys, they called them the Vandal, which is just the Vandal, the Vandals, but slightly tweaked. And for anyone who knows history, the Vandals were a steppe people, a Germanic steppe people who lived in Eastern Europe who were pushed out of their homes and into the Roman Empire by the Huns. And because they were pushed out and the Romans totally botched handling them, they ran amok inside the Roman Empire, raiding and pillaging. The same with the Goths, who eventually became the Visigoths. There's several other Germanic tribes that were pushed out because of that. Eventually, the Huns did show up themselves, and because the Huns, it's also believed that the Huns were pushed out of their lands by the Chinese, by the Han Dynasty years before. It's not 100%. It's a theory that's been running, that's been falling out of practice, out of favor, falling into favor, back and forth over the last about century or so. But the idea that the Chinese pushed the Huns out, the Huns then moved into India and into the Roman Empire, towards the Roman Empire, over the course of 200 years. The displacement of people kept moving west and south, which caused the fall of the Indian empires down south, and the fall of the Persian empires, or like helped lead to the weakenings of the Persian Empire, which I think was the Seleucids at that time. I may be wrong with that one. But then pushed off into Roman Empire and helped cause the strain for it. And so, using that analogy, you could see the Krthok being fought to a standstill by the Xi'an, pushed out into a different area, and are pushing the Vandal out of the traditional hunting grounds and into older hunting grounds where the humans have settled now, and are now pushing the Vandal into human space, which would then eventually mean that the Krthok would show up. That is a theory that more than one person has suggested. It's something that is plausible, but it depends on how they flesh out the Krthok. Ice makers are important. The reason I was asking about the name Super Carry used in Jumptown Wars is because I was going to use them for my Star Citizen character's background. Paul Steed, I think, was the name of. Let me look it up real quickly. We know at least one name of a Bengal. Notable names. Come on, give me some names. They're named after big cats. Pulling up this reference. But yeah, so if they're named after big cats, think of anything like the lynx, the cougar, the panther, the tiger, the UEE tiger, or the UEE I don't know, lion, I guess. That was a comment that was off-mannered. Cringer. So UEE Cringer. Yeah, there we go. War's good for ratings, IRL. Yeah. Let's see. Hey, Ads, how you doing, buddy? I hope the new ship's some kind of competition to the Freelancer and Cutlass. I do too. I think if they're gonna I think that's the biggest blind spot that CIG has right now. They have a ton of small ships, a ton of small fighters, and the medium ships they have are mostly specialty ships. The two versatile ships, well, I guess three kind of versatile ships they have is very, very small compared to the large class. The Corsair, the Constellation, the 600i, the Caterpillar, the whole series. Like, there's a ton of like larger ships. And those ships should be in my opinion, those should be smaller anyways in terms of numbers, because you can need more people to run them. That medium category is that sweet spot between running solo and having a big group. Actually, there's 4 right now. There's the Mercury, there's the Freelancer, the Cutlass, and then the Vanguard are the 4 major ones. So having another one from Origin, or maybe even RSI, would both make sense as well. Let's see. Earthers, Martians, Belters, yes. I think so too. I feel like Bishop's gonna end up being a not so character in Squadron 42. I think he's gonna be his motivations are going to be gray. I think in Squadron 42, the first episode, you're likely going to have Bishop be the main good guy, and in the second episode, you start seeing some of the gray side of things, and maybe in the third episode, you start seeing like his he comes at things from a place that he wants to help. He thinks he's doing the right thing, but every villain is the hero in their own story. So him being the third act villain in Squadron 42 would make a lot of sense. And of course, it's Gary fucking Oldman. The man can play a hero and a villain, and I know if anyone, Academy Award winning Gary Oldman can do that switch between I am a starling hero to I am the villain. So we'll see. Question: how come the UAE let the crash carrier Olympus become salvaged and turned into a home by pirates and rebels? Could it have been a conspiracy? Was there a search and rescue team ever dispatch? We don't know 100% about search and rescue team. Likely the reason why it was left there is because where the Olympus crashed is in Vandul, or on the border of Vandul territory. So, and it was also at the time a huge PR nightmare, and the last thing they needed was for a big expensive project to go in and do that kind of thing. But we don't know. I don't know, because that seems a little bit out of character, because the UAE has basically, whenever they have a huge PR nightmare, they just send in the fleet and fuck everything that doesn't move. Murder everything. That is their plan. Oh, this is a bad thing. We screwed up. Okay, send in everything. Everything, to use a Gary Oldman reference. Everyone. Yeah, they tend to do that. They did that with Nexus after the I forget the name of it. Keller's Run. After Keller's Run, they did the same thing where they're just like, they were super embarrassed by it, so they sent in a fleet to deal with the problem of Nexus being a hotspot of pirates. I could see the same problem. I see them doing the same thing in for the Olympus, but they didn't do it. So I'd have to look into more details about it. Also, I caught Last Bits of Vasquez stream. It was really good. Super jealous that I was there. I wish I had a good writer running the Star Trek campaign for me. Yeah, thank you. I'm not a great writer, but I'm doing my best. The Gauls. Yeah, the Gauls were more of an earlier time in Roman history. So you're dealing with the Gauls, you're dealing with situations around using the Star Citizen equivalent would be the Gauls would be more like the Tavaran would be more like that, though the Tavaran are really more like the Carthaginians, but the same kind of idea, like years before the Vandals showed up. Yeah, in the area now, Krentz, I think so. No, yeah, they were involved in Germanic tribes pushed. They weren't involved. They were actually Romanized by the time the Germanic tribes had pushed into Rome. In fact, a lot of the reasons why Rome was able to conquer Gaul is because the Germanic tribes kept fucking with the Gauls, and the Romans came in and were like, "All right, we'll save you." And then that ended up being the Gauls being like, "Oh, thank you, Rome. You're good friends." And Rome's like, "Yeah, great." And then the Gauls kept being like, "They're insidious. They're gonna turn us into Romans. We have to rebel, otherwise we're gonna lose our freedoms." And so they rebelled, and the Romans like, "Oh, we'll take your freedoms now." A small village next to my birthplace is known as a former Hun village. Apparently my mother came from there, being in Germany, by the way. Oh, nice. Yeah, that makes sense. The reason why the modern country of Hungary exists is because that is where many of the Huns would settle. We think of the Huns as being we know that they are a steppe people from the steppes of like modern day Russia and that region. And we believe that some of their traditions, at least, may be linked to the Huns of the Han Dynasty, and hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, being connected together through culture rather than through blood. Might a rumor, but nice to have beyond myself. You might be, yeah. Have they confirmed how many Bengals will be in the game we can hunt for? No, not yet. If the gang in 3.9 stole an Idris, what shipyard did they steal it from? Likely from Crusader. If there's only one shipyard that I know about in the Stanton system, and that would be the shipyards in Orison. And while I don't think they would build Idrises in Orison, they might. If not, then they sold them from some. There is a closer shipyard nearby. I have to look it up, but look up the systems. There's a shipyard which is also a forge. I don't remember that they're called the Forge. Killian. Yeah, there's a shipyard station at Naval Station MacArthur, which is where they build the Bengal carriers. It's in Killian. It's Killian 4 is what it's where it is. The thing about Killian is directly connected to Cathcart, which is directly connected to Stanton. It's only 2 jumps away. So that could definitely be the birthplace. Either, if I was to do a lore guess, my guess would be MacArthur. It was built in MacArthur, which would be a fucking ballsy ass heist. It would be essentially like breaking into a naval shipyard and stealing a cruiser. Like, whoa, buddy, the cojones on that guy. Wasn't the Bengals called like systems they stand for? No, that's the Idrises. All the Idrises are different systems in the UEE, which is why in Squadron 42 you're aboard the UEES Stanton, United Earth Empire Ship Stanton, which is named after the system that's first in game. It's almost like CIG planned that. Outland, Consolidated Outland is from Bremen, but yeah. 600 Iron Ware. The name of Bengal carrier UE Ocelot. That would work, yeah. Yeah, the 600I is considered a large ship. It's not it's like a subclass capital ship. Even though like technically the Connie and the 600I are in the same class. I still think you need chunker. Extra thick. Small, medium, large, extra thick, and then capital. That's oh, you still need that kind of situation. Compared to the Freelancer Cutlass, yeah. To defeat the Huns, which is, yeah. Question, do you think we'll see asteroids colliding and breaking apart in Tyrannus and striking planets like Tohill, like the descriptions say? If they can get it to work. I think they might have missions where you're have to take care of those asteroids. Like you have to go in and like destroy them Armageddon style before they hit planets. But I don't know if it would be. I think that's a engine thing. Mm-hmm. They might put it into a dry dock in Orison, maybe. Global 13 organization numbering and had a flip chart of fleet comparison. There should be a lot of Bengals out in the UE. There should be. The question is more, how many would there be that will be derelict that you can find? That's the question. Because the UEE tends to build their fleets around a Bengal carrier. It's the center point of the Bengal carrier. Though from my research as well, the UEE has this bad tendency to not give a fuck about patrolling with those fleets. Those fleets are mostly stationary defense that will be called out at when there's an incursion of some kind. So that they just sit around in orbit and wait for something to happen. They rarely will leave unless they're doing maneuvers. And most of the actual protection of the UEE is done by fighters. Yeah, the question about how many Bengals there are out there in terms of me not knowing is more about how many derelict. That's the question. How many derelict Bengals are there? Which we don't know. That'll depend on CIG's own decisions on that one. It's an inside job, I bet. Yes. The Olympus? We don't know. What happened to the prisons update? It's coming. It's in 3.9. They just haven't released it. It's in Evocati right now. They haven't released it out to open yet. Likely everything's slowed down a little bit because of working from home, because of the corona. Because everyone's working from home there. Oh, the Thats of the Interest is an inside job. Oh, yeah. Possibly. Good evening, Armageddon style. I don't want to miss a thing while you shoot your asteroids. Exactly, Jack Wolfhart. Do you think players will be able to acquire Tavaran war cosmetics, memorabilia, or other antique weapons in the Idris system? In the Idris system or in the Cabal system? Because the Cabal system is where they have the cache. But yeah, probably. Group equals Bengal plus escorts. Region equals more groups, and fleet equals more regions. Yeah, but if you look at how the actual like how historically they actually like protect the regions, they tend to not use the big fleets, even as the groups don't tend to be. Those regions tend to not move anywhere. Or battle groups, yeah. One main carrier, 3 to 4 escorts. For this. Yeah, no. So this may be old, or depends. Maybe be updated as well. Because if you look at the actual lore behind all of the fighting going on with the UE Navy, the UE Navy almost never leaves dry dock, it seems like, or leaves these orbits. Almost all of the conflicts outside of the major wars have been fought with small fighter groups. The Lost Squadron, for instance, the Squadron 42, well, it was a little different because that was actually part of, they were attached to a fleet, to a group at least. In general, how that system seems to work doesn't seem to be functioning properly. I think it depends on when that was written. That was probably written back when the Bengal was going to be the centerpiece of Squadron 42, because if you remember, the very beginning of the announcement was the Bengal was going to be the centerpiece of Squadron. At least it seemed like that. But now it's the Idris. So that may have changed recently, and based off of the lore that we've been able to see, I seriously doubt that that's still the case. No, I picked up the link. I see that. It's right here that you put up here. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Let me put it up here. Hold on. This also seems older. Okay, so I was wondering how I do this. So the graphics and everything seem a little bit older for this one too. It makes sense, but for instance, if we look at where it says frigate, FF frigate, which would be a capital ship designation, would be attached to a battle group. The problem about this idea for battle group, think about Squadron 42. You're working with a captain in an Idris, and that Idris may be attached to a home battle group. But that home battle group, you're the only Idris in the Odin system, or you're the only military presence. There's the advocacies there, which is the police forces, but not military. You're the only military forces there. So in reality, the battle group, the head of the battle group, the main carrier, and the escorts probably don't stay around conflict areas. They stay within a region. But they're not sent out a lot. So depending on when this was made is the question. And this doesn't seem like this is a recent thing. This seems more like an older, based off of what I'm seeing here in terms of how it's been written, this is an older design document. So I can still see it working because you also see regional fleet. You have specialty groups as well that kind of stick in with these groups, these fighter squadrons and such. So. Thank you, Spirian. What do you think the new ship will be Friday? And do you think 3.0 will drop then? Probably at least until to first wave PTU. Strike groups are based around India, not fleets. I'm generalizing with that case. But in terms of how the UEE tends to function, it seems to function less like reality, like modern naval groups, like a battle group you might send out to the Middle East. For instance, U.S. might send out which is a headquarters with like at its center is a supercarrier, and that supercarrier is going off and doing actions. This is less like that and more like you have a battle group in the Gulf. At Gulf, and you have ships, individual ships, which are functioning all throughout the Gulf and through the Red Sea and all that kind of stuff. So in using that kind of example, you might have let's just say the 409th Battle Group, which is headquartered in, let's say Terra. And that battle group may be responsible for multiple systems. Even though this also says the regional fleets will also have regions, so you'd have like Terra. So Terra might have 4 battle groups as part of it. But most of those battle groups will remain in Terra, even as part of that regional fleet. And then they will send their smaller ships out to do reconnaissance and patrol missions within the borders or near hostile borders. Because that seems to be how they work. In fact, most of the defense of the UEE is made up of ground-based fighter squadrons, which seem to be put into individual UEE systems. So it's a weird kind of like the lore doesn't match up with the way they talk, and I think it's mostly for dramatic's sake, because if you're the only Idris in the Odin system and everything's going to hell, that's more exciting than being like, oh, we've got an entire fucking battle group here. here's a Bengal carrier and 2 javelins and 3 more Idrises hanging out with you. Like, fuck off. No one's gonna stop you. That's the thing. So. Oh no, they do, but they tend to not use them, and that's actually one of the big concerns is that. As most of these groups and these fleets are being moved out of the regions they're supposed to be protecting to go fight the Vanduul, it's leaving huge gaps back at home, which are not being filled. That's the reason why the militia initiative, the UEE militia initiative exists. Hey, Moonrunner. Yeah, we talk about lore and stuff. Yeah, if you guys are new here, Yeah, you're not wrong, Asmer. But I think there's also going to be response time is going to be the issue as well. Run away, little girl. Yeah. Yeah. The way that it tends to work in practice, from what I can tell, is you may have a fleet, Terra, Earth, or a fleet like Northern, Eastern, Western fleet. Then you have regional fleets, which are inside those fleets, which are like Earth region, Terra region, Killian region. And those regions are several systems around, but those systems are patrolled by most of the patrol craft in those fleets, in the battle groups. They tend to be mostly patrolled by Hammerheads, Polarises, and Idrises. In reality, a battle group is more likely an Idris, a couple of Hammerheads, and a couple of Polarises. That's more likely a battle group that you'll see, because the Idris functions as essentially a small fleet carrier, or a small escort carrier, or auxiliary carrier. And it also may be a little confusing because, like in the US, we use the Coast Guard, and then we also have the Navy. And the Coast Guard definitely doesn't have a carrier. And the Navy seems to fill both of those roles, domestic and foreign intervention. So it gets mixed up when it comes to those kind of things. Has CIG said anything about how players in the game are going to learn about the lore? There's a couple ways. First off, mission givers are going to be the main source of lore and storytelling. Secondly, they're going to try to add more lore details in the game, videos. They already kind of do that a little bit with the ads and such. And thirdly, there will be events they've talked about, things that happen for story points. And lastly, there'll be a data station called the Ark, where you can just go and learn all you want. It has all the information that's available in the game. Javelins tend to focus more with the larger fleets. You got to think about it this way. You wouldn't use a tank to keep the peace in a major metropolitan city unless there was something seriously fucking wrong going on. You wouldn't roll a tank into, New York. You wouldn't park a battleship or cruiser in New York Harbor unless there's something seriously going wrong, or if it's fleet, maneuvers, Fleet Week, or whatever the hell it's called. Same kind of thing works with the UEE. The UEE's bigger ships, Javelin and up, tend to stick with the larger fleets, and they tend to be called out to hotspots. So Vanduul attack Vega. The regional fleet or the battle groups in those regions will then be called out to counter the Vega attack. Some of those battle groups may be in Vega, or they may be in another system, but they respond to those attacks. And the main defense that most of these systems have are the Polarises, the Hammerheads, and the Idrises, which are patrolling those, because they're lighter weight. They don't cost as much to run. But they still are able to deal with most criminal problems. Like if there's a criminal situation that's super serious, no one's going to stop an Idris with a railgun. Your souped up caterpillar is going to get fucked by an Idris in that situation. So you can think of them as essentially Coast Guard cutters in that kind of way. Yeah. The Russians did, yes. Gladius is not a bad choice. You got into Wing Commander because I'm glad to see him in Star Citizen? Nice. My guess, next sale will be Prison Break ship. Sarcasm, yeah. Yeah, it's a good fighter. As far as fighters go, I haven't flown anything in a long time that's given me a stupid, shit-eating grin on my face like the Gladius has. Gladius is a fun ship to fly. So what are the Vanduul about? I know nothing. There are a clan-based society that seems to be, doesn't seem to have a central core. Each Vanduul clan has a kingship, which is the center of its universe. And that kingship functions as kind of like a mobile homeworld. Because the Vanduul, and I will issue this as well, I'll say it here in a bit, but because someone corrected me, is like, well, I think Vanduul have honor, and I'll explain a little bit about my previous statement about that in the past. But generally speaking, the Vanduul are a martial society. They tend to believe in warrior combat. They seem to be a little bit more xenophobic. They seem to be much more supremacist. And they seem to also tend to not be, as I said before, unified, but they're not just not unified. They tend to be in conflict with one another as much as they are with the rest of the universe. So like a Vanduul might break off from their clan, take a couple of members from that clan with them, build a new kingship, and then form a new clan. So there may be dozens or hundreds or thousands of clans of Vanduul, but they're not all one unified people like the Xi'an or humanity is. And even humanity is not really unified, but there's no one central core government that exists in the Vanduul. So this was pointed out, was that the Vanduul, as they become more advanced, they lose armor. They actually take armor off. They become more naked as they get better at fighting, as they become more renowned. And someone pointed out to me, he's like, well, that's the proof that they have honor. Because I said that they generally, they're not the Klingons. You know, they're not like honor. Fight me in one-on-one combat and we'll decide this. Oh, you beat me. I surrender to you. The Vanduul aren't like that. But they are honorable in the sense that they respect each other. So if someone's just getting fucking good at fighting, they start taking their armor off, and then they're allowed to take their armor off to show more of their skin as they're fighting. To other Vanduul, that's a sign. It's like, hey, I'm a badass. Fuck you. Because they have to fight each other as much as if they fight the other species. So when they're fighting other species, that doesn't matter as much. But to other Vanduul seeing that, they can go, that guy right there. And that seems to be a large part of their culture. It seems to be more about who is got the most renown, who's got the most. It's more, I guess it's more like, think of it, I would say more barbaric. It's more ancient in terms of the way it deals things. The person who is shown to be the most capable fighter tends to be the most capable leader. Not always the case, but that seems to be how the Vanduul kind of structure their society. Prowess based, thank you, yeah. Less Klingons or the elites in Halo, and more brutes in Halo, you know. The Vanduul are less elite and more less Sangheili and more brute. Wouldn't the prestige and power of a Vanduul clan be shown by splitting/forming a new kingship for a new clan? No. I mean, if someone was prestigious enough, if someone was badass enough, they could split off and form their own clan if they feel like they're strong enough and they can convince people to do it. We don't know. They come from what in humanity calls the Western Empire, the borders of the Western Empire. In some cases, like Virgil, which was like the 4th or 5th planet ever discovered by humanity. So we're talking 600 years almost, or 400, 500 years. no one bothered. Like humanity was got there, terraformed, built an entire cities and like civilizations. Generations of people lived in Virgil before the Vandal showed up and took it. So one of the theories is that they're nomadic. So they come to a system, harvest the shit out of it, then leave, and then they wait hundreds of years, and then come back to those systems and harvest them again once all of that stuff has been grown. And so humanity just had the bad luck of stumbling upon Vandal space, seeing nobody was the fuck there, and just took it for themselves. Yeah, like a lion pride. I think that's a great way of looking at it as well. You got to remember that the Vandal are basically the Star Citizen equivalent of the Kilrathi. So, though less lion and more gulperfish, whatever, the little dangler fish, the anglerfish. Bioluminescence and mean motherfuckers. Mixed between like a very angry toothy frog. No problem, Moonrunner. Yeah, I like this kind of stuff. I actually do an entire series called Galactic Historian for those of you guys who are watching this live and not watching this on YouTube. !GH in chat. That'll bring you a link to my playlist, and that playlist will have all of this stuff. Yeah, shot so easily need several layers of armor. Yeah, the anglerfish. Yeah. Honor, glory to you and your house. So like reptile Kilrathi. Yeah, I would say less reptile Kilrathi and more amphibian Kilrathi, because they also bioluminesce. Their body has bioluminescence in it, so they glow when they're show off moods or like as a status symbol kind of thing. Which I guess is more anglerfish too. But they also seem to be able to breathe air, so they're not like ocean based. They don't live in water. So like an amphibian version of an anglerfish. Exactly, Angle. Eagle, that's the idea, is that you can come in, we can talk turkey, you can get rare booze, sell rare booze, talk with other players. The idea of it is being kind of a social hub. And it's not going to be a physical location unless CIG allows me to buy a physical location, then it eventually will, but it's actually going to be a ship. Yes, Masso, and that's my point, is that but the fact that the Kilrathi are based off of like lions is where the Kilrathi come from, is where that kind of like equivalence comes from with the Vandal. The actual I was going to expand upon this, but there are two real analogies for the Kilrathi. Part of it is the Vandal, and part of it it's like the Vandal got into the teleporter from the Fly, or got into a transporter accident and created two different parts of their. It's the opposite of teleporter and Fly. Two different parts of their personalities. The most aggressive and violent tendencies are in the Vandal, and their honor-based society and martial beliefs are in the Tavaran. The Tavaran are the Vandal are the stand-in for the Kilrathi as the bad guys, but the Tavaran are the stand-in for the Kilrathi as the post-Wing Commander 4 Kilrathi. The defeated and semi, well, they're Klingons, but, similar idea. That kind of thing. Merchantman or privateer? Prefer? I would say privateer. But that's because I don't know what the merchantman looks like yet. I have a merchantman, though. Yeah. So do we know the plot of Squadron 42 yet? Should get a beta soon, September, right? That's the plan. They're not going to release a beta to people, but they'll when they get into beta state means that they're done with the assets. It's feature complete, not content complete. So they've got all the features that makes the game function, and then they continue to flesh out the levels and characters, and like they do a lot of detail work. And then sometime next year they'll release Squadron 42. Next year or the year after that would be the plan. Hopefully the Corona thing doesn't slow them down too much. It might slow them down a couple of months, I would say, just because they have to get used to the idea of working at home. But similar archetypes, yeah. Yeah, there is also the Galactipedia. The Galactipedia is a good for short snippets. If you don't want to read a fuck ton of stuff, the Galactipedia is great. It kind of works as like a Wikipedia, but more brevity. It gets you the basics you need. But we do know the plot of Squadron 42. It's been leaked multiple times. The script hasn't been leaked, but the missions descriptions have been leaked. The overall plot synopsis, the elevator pitch, Chris basically leaked it when he was back in 2011, 2012. And the audio files for the entire game have been leaked. So we know the whole story. If you wanted to put in the legwork, you can get the general idea of what the story is. I know the whole story of Squadron 42. I don't know the details because I spoiled myself like an idiot, but I'm still excited to play it because I'm interested to see where it goes. You'd have to. I don't know where it is now. Like the problem is like the leak of the mission titles was like 2014 was that leak that happened. Same with the audio files. And there's an interview with Chris. Look up old 2012 interviews with Chris Roberts, and you'll find him talking about Squadron 42. Only if you want to spoil yourself. I know some people are of like my wife is of the class that's like, I don't give a shit about spoilers. I'm going to spoil myself beforehand because I want to know if it's good. Oh, this sounds good. I'm going to play it now, because this is going to sound weird coming from somebody who likes story and lore. The good part about a game that makes it different from a movie or television show is that you get to play it. So knowing how the story ends doesn't matter as much as movies or television shows where like the whole point would be to know what it is. It's more about playing that point, like the emotions of playing the points leading up to that. Yeah. It's the journey, not the destination situation. The destination should feel earned. And it's hard to tell if it's earned just by knowing it. Like, I could tell you that this isn't a spoiler, so don't freak out on me. You could say Earth is destroyed at the end of Squadron 42. That doesn't matter. Like, that plot point as the ending doesn't matter as much as how it got destroyed, how you got to that point, all that kind of stuff. It's not an actual spoiler, but it's just one of those, like, that I know of. It's just one of those, like, general... hand waves. Those general ideas is that knowing the end of the story doesn't make the actual story any worse or better. It matters how that story leads to that point. Whew. Let's see how long we've been streaming. About an hour. How does someone get lucky enough to play one of your RPG games? Playing one of our RPG games? I have to have time. Oh, Buckeye, I didn't see you. Thank you for that resub and Moonrunner. Thank you so much for those. Let's go for the archive or active. Active and active. Everyone gets more beers because we had a follow and a oh, and you got another follow too. 30 beers for everybody. That's hard to talk about because the RPG games I do are, for me, more about the broadcast, more about, I wouldn't say content, but like fun, like the idea of kind of spreading it out there. And that kind of idea is as much playing the game as it is playing a character. You know what I mean? Think of it as part tabletop RPG, part play, is how that works. And my issue right now is time. I just don't have enough time to do a lot of them. My plan is to do a total of 4 campaigns with 1 variable campaign. The current campaign I'm working on, I have Expanse, the Expanse RPG. I have Star Trek RPG, Star Trek Adventures. In the summer, I'm going to do a Star Citizen RPG, I hope. I have to kind of nail that down, with a new cast, or mostly new cast, based off of the Stars Without Number RPG. And in the fall, I'm going to be doing a Stars Without Number RPG, a kind of vanilla Stars Without Number. It's the only like based on another series kind of RPG, which is going to be more like mecha anime inspired. Space, but mecha anime inspired is going to be the design. And then, so like that third one, the summer one, will be variable. It may, the next year I might do Star Trek, or next one I might do Star Wars, I might do another Star Citizen, I might do Battletech or Shadowrun or something like that. It'll be space or sci-fi themes. So that'll kind of change throughout that. Thank you, Spirian. Just gone. It's all right. It'll come back. Do you think players will be able to do racing as a full-time profession against NPC ships? Yes. I think once they get that down, that seems easier. It seems probably going to be a little easier for them to do. It's just not a priority right now. The key for that is getting NPCs to function properly, to get the right racetracks working, and that all seems to me like a good addition, but it seems like a good addition when you're not falling through planets on a regular basis, and you can scan and fly, and the flight mechanics don't seem off, sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's going to happen, because I think that's an easy win for CIG down the line. And again, I say easy, knowing that nothing in fucking development is ever easy. But that's less complicated than building subsistence, for instance. But because it's not as required, it's not something that I would expect anytime soon. Yeah, I'd either do Shadowrun or Cyberpunk, something like that. It'll be both. Squadron 42, the Titan suit is going to be in Squadron 42. I can almost guarantee it. I don't have proof that it's there, but it seems like a set piece kind of thing, maybe even a player control thing. And for sure, it's going to come in Star Citizen. In fact, it was first added in Squadron 42. It's on a roadmap for Squadron 42 first, then Star Citizen. Anxious, I always thought a fun RPG idea would be to have all your people play as androids that are subject to Asimov's 3 laws, but also part of a group trying to gain freedom and equal rights for androids. Starfinder. That'd be kind of cool. Yeah, I think Moonbase, or Will Sperling, the guy who plays with us on Wednesdays, he did a Star Wars RPG where every one of the players was a droid. I think they had a main goal of like getting off a planet was their main goal for that, like kind of a one shot, and that's where he actually came up with the idea for trash can, or TRAS. Like, it's like trash dash C4N, something like that, as a murder bot. All right, so I'm going to plug this a little bit. I'm not going to do a preview of it because I want you guys to watch it tomorrow. But tomorrow at... double check this real quick. Check the actual time for it, but it'll be tomorrow. Tomorrow at April 1st at 6 p.m., we will be doing the Jumptown Wars premiere, episode 1 of the Jumptown Wars. Now, how this is going to work is I'm going to do episode 1 of Jumptown Wars and episode 2 of the Jumptown Wars. And after those two are released, I will then release a full documentary, which is episode 1 and 2 combined, to create one larger documentary. So that's just for the sake of, like, I got to get it done and people want to have that content, but I also want to have that larger form out there as well for people to use. So episode 1 is the background to the Jumptown Wars. And for those of you guys who don't know what the Jumptown Wars are, it is an interesting part where gameplay met and combined with lore. The Jumptown Wars was a time between November 2018 and March of 2019. February, March of 2019, when pretty much there were other ways of making money, but the fastest and most effective way of making money was to run drugs, Widow specifically, from an unmarked drug lab on Yela, a southern hemisphere of Yela, at a place that was known in-game as Jumptown. So a lot of people reference it as the Yela Drug Lab rather than Jumptown, but it's known in-game as Jumptown. It says Jumptown. And the thing about it is that if you could fly down to Jumptown, load up your cargo hold full of drugs, you could then fly just a little bit out and like quantum to Grimhex, land and sell your whole load for like 50 to 60% profits. So if you put in 10K, you would be getting 5K back, 6K in profits from one run. And those runs would take at most 10 minutes. So because of that, because the profit margin was so high and all the other things didn't have nearly as high of a profit margin, you still make money, but just not as much money, people started to do drug runs. Now, the thing about it is that drug runs are not in a place that's protected. So PvPers started to go down there and fuck with people who were trying to buy and sell drugs. And this ended up being a huge kerfluffle because then other people would come down there and try to clear out those people. It was a huge in-game event that was not planned by CIG. It just happened because people were drawn to this area of high conflict. And it went on from November to March and the next year. And then in March, towards the end of the event, they actually had a lore post that referenced the conflict at Jumptown, making the conflicts at Jumptown officially canon in game. So as a result, I wanted to make a lore post because A, fucking cool that it's a lore that players made that actually made it into the game, and B, to record the events of Jumptown because I started to see people who've been coming into the game in the last year who weren't part of the Jumptown Wars. I was in the Jumptown Wars. I extorted people for money and then run drugs myself because it was money, and protected people who were trying to run drugs. Like, I did all the things, even went down and cleared out the areas because horrible criminals selling drugs. So as someone who participated in it and a lore junkie, I wanted to and a historian, I kind of wanted to create a living record. So episode 1 is just the background for it. It is the lore background of the Stanton system and how the Jumptown was made. Goes right up to the formation of Jumptown as an entity in the universe. And then episode 2 is going to cover what Widow is, and then how Widow became super profitable, how people discovered about Widow, and then kind of the whole Jumptown Wars experience, everyone's individual stories, chronicling the different types of ships that were used for combat, the ebb and flow of the conflict, and of course the end of the conflict. So it's 2-part episodes because it was too long to put in one. It would have been a 40, maybe 50-minute episode, a full documentary basically. And I just finished it last week, like on Friday, I think. The episode, enough for first episode, and I added the credits and everything, and it ended up being 20 minutes. I was like, oh yeah, let's stick with that right now. So. Yeah. Have they talked about racing in the past? Plus an Arena Commander, there's a racetracks. Yes, they have. So they've talked about racing. They have racing ships. There is the Murray Cup, which exists in game. I imagine there's going to be underground races. I thought they had removed the racetracks for Grimhex, but apparently it's still there. They still have a racetrack built into, like a starting point for in Grimhex for Grimhex, which they were going to have an entire racetrack around Grimhex. So, yeah, a lot of people were in the Jumptown Wars. But, Dano, the thing is, there's a lot of people who weren't. And that's the crazy thing. There's a lot of people coming in who are like, I wasn't part of this. What is this? It's like, yeah. Needs to be preserved. It's next level cool that this was lore canon that was player made in an alpha state. Exactly. One of the things that a lot of people have also been saying from one of my other captain's tables, I mentioned that the in-game event that's coming in, I think is going to be the Xeno threat, the message, the garbled message we heard in November coming to fruition. And I saw people were like, well, it makes no sense to do it in an alpha state. They wouldn't do that. That's a waste of resources. That's stupid. It's like, not really, because the game itself is an alpha, but you still want to encourage people to play. And by doing something like an event that, like Jumptown, you have to be part of it to understand it. It creates culture. And creating culture in a game is a great way of proving to other gamers that this is worth it. Think about the wars in Eve, or the pandemic in WoW. These were all events which were either planned or unplanned that ended up becoming a huge part of, or even all the story points in WoW. It becomes a huge part of players kind of identifying with the game and bringing more people in who are intrigued about it. So it was a stupid t-shirt. Devil Dog, my plan is, and I've looked up to the designs for this, is that when episode 2 of Jumptown Wars comes out, I'm going to release a t-shirt that says Jumptown Wars Veteran on it and sell it. And the proceeds will go to Stack Up. Anything I make from money from that will go to stackup.org, which is an organization that helps veterans and active duty personnel from Australia, New Zealand, United States, Canada, the NATO countries, basically U.S. and its allies. Any country that wants to get like mental health support, video games, computer parts, that kind of stuff. Even sends veterans and active duty personnel to gaming events. It's a gaming charity that I've supported. So my plan is to do that and sell that shirt for Stack Up. Plus, events are good practice for the future. They're great for the future, and especially if you do it at a small, low-risk scale event like that, it will add lore to the game, so people will start saying, oh, so I need to pay attention to lore a little bit more. So it gets players more interested in that, which is important because CIG seems to want the lore to dictate a lot of the actions that are going on in the universe. And since there's going to be, it's a sandbox, you have a plethora of people you can work with. People going I'm going to go work with this syndicate. Okay, now this other syndicate wants to give me a job. I'm going to go work with that. Wait, why does this other syndicate not want to talk to me anymore? Not realizing that both of the syndicates are in competition with one another, and so you've lost reputation as a result. And most players won't realize that, I don't think, or know the nuances between those. And you can already see it today when people are like, I did bounty hunting missions, but now I can't do any of the drug running missions or any of the smuggling missions. Why is that? It's like, because you fucked off with you're murdering the illegal people's like the gang's members, dude. So that, for instance, is just a small example, but that's important. It'll also stress test the servers. It'll tell you in a small, low-risk event will let you know what went wrong, how to fix those things in the future without having a huge issue, because it's alpha. Because if it fucks up, you just be like, it's alpha, it doesn't count. It's not part of the lore. It's alpha. But if it is, and it really works well, they can be like, hey, this is alpha. Or this is canon. We're going to put that in there. Now we can go from there. So. Only if mega backers start killing each other. When Test goes to war with the rest of the universe, that'll be called the Whale Wars. All right. I realized that that's the reason why it wasn't working. Boop. They have not said where the space whales are going to be located. CIG has not said anything about where the space whales are. Has CIG said where that run across a moon also made it into lore, or was it first lore, then players ran the event? Daymar Rally? Daymar Rally's not in the lore yet. They may put it into lore, but I made a video about the Daymar Rally, and I blended lore with the game lore, or the actual event lore that was created itself. But it's... like, it's not yet. I'd like for them to add it into lore, though. I don't know of any other game where they had a player-ran event over months that not only made it into the official canon of the game, but also was done while the game was still in the alpha stage development. It makes me wonder what else we can do. That's the whole, like, that's the cornerstone of lore in Star Citizen. Chris Roberts from the very beginning said he hated MMOs where you play the game and you're supposed to be this big badass. Only everyone is a big badass. Everyone is the divine hero. And you go off and you slay the king and nothing changes. Nothing fundamentally changes in the universe. No stories are really changed. The only thing that can change the story is like these big overarching events, but your actions don't mean shit. And as a result, he wanted the lore to be dynamic. He wanted the lore to be able to change with players' input. Now, making a duty, you know, I was able to go to the party by myself in game, is not going to make it into lore. But Jumptown, which is completely not created by Star Citizen at all, is, because that's the kind of idea that CIG is running. It's like, this is a huge event. This involved thousands of people over almost 6 months of IRL time and in game time, almost half a year. This war was going on. This conflict was going on. Of course it should make it into lore. It would be like a gang war in, you know, downtown Manhattan, you know, going on for 6 months with thousands of people killing each other. Of course people would talk about it. Now, it may not make national news, but it sure as hell is going to go down in local history. So Yeah, that's true. I'd like to see, if they don't watch this, but if CIG, the lore guys are watching, talk with the Daemon Rally folks and please make it into lore. It should happen. It's a player-run event, just like the Jumptown Wars were, which they did canonize. So, just a little reference is all you need, like a little reference saying that, you know, the Daemon Rally is back in Daemar and it's causing lots of stirs after what's this, you know, the guy who Cain ran with the last almost ran the entire way through the end. It was. Jumptown was the first drug lab. But the Jumptown was around for a lot longer than people remember. I was doing Jumptown runs in April of 2018. Back when the beacon system was first introduced, you could call for a beacon, for transport beacon, to Jumptown. So you'd know where it is. You call for a transport beacon, someone pick it up, and then they would know the location of where it was. I was doing drug runs in Jumptown well before the Jumptown Wars. But the Jumptown Wars happened because of an economic shift from metals, from laranite becoming less profitable, and as a result, drugs became the most profitable commodity. Thank you, Devilog. Yeah, I'm glad. Thank you for referencing for referencing me and calling out for the shout out there, Jared. It means a lot. Especially since Jared is a really good YouTuber. Those of you guys who don't know, Jared made a lot of YouTube videos. He did work pretty professionally. He's really good at it. And I'm glad that he enjoys it. Yeah, it still kind of is, but like, it was a small change that caused the Jumptown Wars to happen. CR did say a long time ago that no space whale has been introduced to the concept. Yes, but now they're doing full on concept art for it. So I'd like to say that the Jumptown Wars, or the reference that Jared made, was actually increased people watching. I've been getting a lot more people interested in it. A lot more people have been commenting on my old Galactic Historian videos. So get her done. Well, space whales have been a common trope in sci-fi for years. I mean, it's one of the main. It's like a major plot point in Rebels, in Star Wars Rebels, is space whales. Whales have always been. I mean, Star Trek used whales, not space whales, but whales, as a a metaphor for things like environmental degradation. And the reality is that the Star Citizen universe is very, very empty. It needs more AI flying around and doing stuff, and B, it needs fauna. It needs things existing on planets and in space. I will never apologize for my desire for unbelievable silicon-based spiders which live on the hulks of Rex that float around and attach themselves to the hulks of Rex and eat the metal, and will attack you and kill you if you try to board Rex. Why? Because it doesn't matter if it's realistic. What matters is it dramatic? Is it going to scare the fuck out of players? Is it going to create an environment which is interesting for the player to deal with? Yes? Then fucking hand wave it. Lore, whatever, you know? Yeah, like the replicators or the spiders from Lost in Space or that kind of thing. But he's in it, exactly. Count to space whales, yes. Yeah, as long as I think the thing about space whales is that as long as space whales aren't just there because space whales, that doesn't make any sense. They have to have a narrative purpose or do something for the universe, you know? Like rantas exist as a means to give caves more life, because in reality caves are filled with life. You know, some caves have fish, blind fish that live in them, or crabs or lobsters. Some caves have you know, mushrooms, bats, rats, bears, large felines, you know, like cougars and panthers and you know, that kind of things live in caves. Bugs live in caves. You know, there's tons and tons and tons of different kind of species or like creatures that live in caves. It makes no sense for caves to be empty. So having a species that lives in caves, even just one, adds a little bit to the ecosystem of caves. Moles, yeah. Well, I think moles live underground. They may live in caves. Tribbles that infest your cargo, yeah. Weta. Now, I know Weta is a reference to an actual thing. But I only know Weta. Okay, so it's a as the Weta workshop. That makes sense. Giant. It looks like a giant ant. "70 insect species of families in epidemic New Zealand." Yeah. So yeah, that's where Weta Workshop comes from. Because I know Weta Workshop is the group that horror filmmaker who made Lord of the Rings. He made. Do you think the remaining humans on Armitage will be hostile, or do you think they'll trade with them? I think they'll trade. You'll be able to trade with them. I think they'll be incredibly violent, though. Space whales concentrated in rare gases in their shit. Collect poop for continuous profit, or kill the whale for quick big profit. Yeah, that's exactly a thing. And you could also have in plot lines where space whales are rare, where like space whales, for instance, live in gas giants, but they can actually travel interstellar. But when they travel interstellar, they have to go into a certain stage. Like they have some sort of metamorphosis they do that protects them, and they go into long-term hibernation as they pass between systems looking for gases. Think water bears. Just called water bears. Discovery had the actual name for them. I can't remember the scientific name for them, but water bears have been known to survive in vacuum. So we know that species can survive in vacuum, even microscopic species, but you could see that. Tardigrades, thank you. Everyone calls them tardigrades, but they're just so much cuter to call them water bears. I mean, Devil Dog, I think that's the key case. I honestly think that the best case for space whales is that they live in Crusader, and that one of the things that Crusader does is protect them from poachers, but they have some sort of rare element that they excrete or that they refine with their eating. Maybe they create quantum fuel on accident. Maybe that's how they travel, is that part of their natural diet, the waste is quantum fuel. And so when they decide they're going to leave an atmosphere, maybe for migration for some reason, they store up a bunch of excess quantum fuel and then have a means to use it as kind of a slow burn transportation device. Go into a hibernation state and just and literally fart their way out of out of the system. Quantum farts. That's just a stupid, silly idea, but I could still see that being an important thing because it's a corporate-run world with a species that's probably pretty super rare that isn't protected well because fuck Crusader security is morons. They don't know what they're doing. So, those humans are dicks, yeah. They could use jump points, yeah. It may be why they're so rare there, General. I could see it as they exist in certain gas giants, and they exist in a bunch of different gas giants, and they don't know why. And the theory is that they accidentally into jump points. I mean, we know a lot of microscopic species can survive in vacuum and just get rehydrated and come back to life. So, space whale roadkill. Yes, there is an oddly shaped asteroid that they call the space whale. That was where the space whale joke went to, was that there's a space whale. And players kept demanding space whales as a joke, and so now they're actually making space whales. And again, as long as it serves a narrative purpose. And I could see the whales being, in terms of a story-driven way, as being good and bad, sort of. Good being... here's a great gray area for just storytelling. The space whales exist in Crusader. They're called the Crusader space whales. They only exist in Crusader. They exist in the upper atmosphere of gas giants because the Crusader's weird. It's always been weird. There are very few of them that exist, but there has been, whenever they find dead space whales, they've been doing experiments on them to kind of see kind of figure out their biology, and they've discovered that something about their biology has some incredible application for human health. Longer life, more improved fusion technology, improved quantum travel, something like that. There's something in their biology that improves humanity. And so some scientists are trying to study to see how they can duplicate it, and other scientists are like, yo, let's just kill them. Fuck them, we're humans. We need this, they don't. And so you have this kind of moral tale. Do you want to work with the group that's harvesting the space whales for their own purposes? Or do you want to work with a group that's trying to research them in a more humane way? Because if it helps humans, why not? You know, that kind of, it's for some people, that's a moral quandary in the sense of, like, for me personally, be like, nah, I'm not going to kill the space whales, fuck that. But I could see other people being like, but it's going to help humans. Like, maybe it has some sort of application which can be done to save lives, thousands of lives, millions of lives. Would you do it or not? That's kind of thing. It's a bit far-fetched to me. I just like the idea of them farting across the stars. You mean Chef Lando? Yes, we need a Chef Lando. We don't know. That could be a thing. What I just said was theory. It was just kind of like an idea you could throw out there. Because one of the things that a lot of people kind of, I think, lose the plot with when it comes to lore, not just in Star Citizen, but in general, is they tend to think everything needs to make sense. It needs to, like, the lore needs to be perfect and not have any contradictions. And the answer to that is, I get it. You want to have lore stay within consistency, but I'm not going to nitpick if it makes fun, if it's fun, or if it makes something interesting, or it explores topics that are important. You know, I'm also a Star Trek fan, so like plot inconsistencies is the entire fucking series. So it's been weird going like looking at Star Wars and going people going like, but this doesn't make any sense because this. And I'm like, who cares? Does it tell the story well? Is it well done? Are you engaged? It doesn't matter if it throws the whole damn thing, like a lot of the details out of whack. What matters is it good or not? In a Drake food truck, Gib? Yes. I think that's the important part to remember when it comes to telling sci-fi stories, especially in Star Citizen, is it fun? Is it good gameplay? And is it engaging? It's science fiction. It's science fantasy, but it's still in that same kind of genre. I wouldn't consider Star Trek to be hard sci-fi either. All right, guys. Any more questions? Ooh, got another follow. I didn't see that. Oop, whatever. That's fine. I think the most popular hard sci-fi would be The Expanse. Hard sci-fi would be limiting yourself to as much as possible, as much as feasible, to science fiction or to the realities of science. So something like Star Trek, TOS, and TNG are more hard sci-fi, and then later seasons of TNG and into the modern like Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and like modern Star Trek is more science fantasy, and it's less science hard sci-fi, and more kind of in between those two. Not as sci-fi as science fantasy as Star Wars, but it's still not as believable. It's more like up there with like Battlestar Galactica in terms of adding some spiritual elements, adding some people travel super quick. But The Expanse, I think, is probably the blueprint for hard sci-fi, trying to do hard sci-fi in television kind of format. Yeah, Arthur C. Clarke, Rendezvous with Rama, 2001: Space Odyssey. Those are very much the hard sci-fi, because Arthur C. Clarke was a scientist. Forever War, a good example of hard sci-fi. I'd have to argue. I would say I've heard that argument before, but I find that people use that argument more as a cudgel than as what it's supposed to be. So minor inconsistencies, meh. Even if some things are like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Let me give you a good example. I've been doing a lot of research into Star Trek because I've been doing a lot more stuff with this hip-top thing. I've been talking about this the whole episode, but in the TOS series, the original series, they just go back in time because they can. And they never fucking bring that back in the future. They completely change that in the future with future Star Trek. But that doesn't break the universe. Just because it becomes more rare, becomes less less. It becomes less. It's not internally consistent. Let me put it that way, in terms of how they treat it. That doesn't matter because they're telling a story. And they fix it later. And no one will bring that up. No one will even talk about it outside of really hardcore Star Trek fans. The reality is that I think people focus so much on lore, and this is funny from coming from a lore guy, that lore is more important than stories, which shouldn't be the case. I'm not saying, fuck it, let's make Harry Potter in Star Wars universe. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that often the arguments that people make for those that it's not internally consistent, thus I don't like it, is more, it's not internally consistent within the series or because of a very small detail that I focused on, rather than does it make sense for the movie that it's in, or the episode that it's in, or the series that it's in. I mean, a great example of that is the Doctor Who's in Doctor Who. Like, there's only supposed to be 12 doctors. Now there's not. This doesn't really matter that much because they wanted to keep telling the stories. If there's something that need to change, or something that needs to change to tell a better story or to continue the story, that's what's important. Hey, Triple U. Stuart, thank you so much for that 24 months, man. Yeah. Like people complaining about Star Trek or Star Wars. We're like, suddenly there's these force powers that exist. They didn't exist before. It's like every Star Wars movie has new force powers. It's how they do things. It's like, it's part of the spectacle, you know? But if between one Star Wars movie and another Star Wars movie, his name is Luke, and then the next movie, his name is James, the fuck doesn't make any fucking sense. Another great example, which is kind of weird, is that in Star Trek, the original series, his name is James Tiberius Kirk. We know that's his name. It's been mentioned a couple times. But his original middle name was P. James P. Kirk, I believe, or S, something like that. It wasn't Tiberius. It was something else. But they came up with the middle name in, I think, the animated series, and it stuck throughout. Hey, Cajun. Joining my first office hours. Thank you for coming for 23 months, man. Asimov was a scientist, too. I don't know how much of a scientist Asimov was. I think he was more of a scientific philosopher. Something more akin to Tsiolkovsky, though I don't know a lot about Asimov. I could be completely wrong with that. That's just based off my opinion on him. Now, a lot of his philosophy around robotics has become adopted by most people who are dealing with AI and robotics. Yeah, his name originally in the very first season of Star Trek, the original series, it wasn't James T. Kirk. It was James something else. The name James T. Kirk came from the animated series, so it was a retcon. G Sharp, thanks for that 13 months, man. Ooh, Hype Train coming through. Toot toot. What was he professor in? The big one comes to me is the Star Wars hyperspace jump that killed the whole First Order fleet. It really breaks how the battles in the universe works. If it had been developed by huge tungsten rods, hyperdrives on them, and firing the fleets, it looked incredible. But upon thinking about it, it really breaks the fleet tactics. I think that's also where you have to kind of draw the line between things. Is it looked good, and the point was more emotional than it was realistic. I don't think anyone will remember the Holdo maneuver in 10 years. No one will talk about it. No one will give a shit about it. It's just right now people are super emotional about it. It's kind of like every generation. It really first happened with Star Trek, and I think it kind of happened with Doctor Who, where the older generations of fans become super angry and nitpicky about the new generation of stuff that's coming out because they think it ruins whatever their experience was before. But in reality, it doesn't really do that. Like long term, no one really remembers that. Later, devlog, thanks for hanging out, man. A space wizard did it. Yes. Chemistry, biochemistry. Asimov was a chemistry professor. Seems weird that he was dealing in robotics and sci-fi. Yeah, maybe. But that's the other thing is that, like, if you want to think about it with Star Wars, nothing makes internal consistency make sense in Star Wars. If you can use the Force, which is this all-powerful thing that can move shit, why didn't Luke just crush like reach within his mind and destroy the second Death Star? He's got the Force. He's this incredibly powerful Force user. There's no real like internal logic that says he couldn't do it. He just doesn't do it. But he wasn't mentioned in the past, so why couldn't he have done it? We've seen in other extended canon, Force users rip entire spaceships out of orbit with their mind. Why couldn't someone do that? Someone like Luke, who's the son of Darth Vader, of Anakin Skywalker, who's the most powerful Jedi in the universe. That Star Wars falls down that problem a lot. Internal consistency in Star Wars is garbage because it's science fantasy. It's not really science fiction. Science and engineering task. Yeah. Yeah, I know Arthur C. Clarke was a radar operator during the war, and he came up with the telecommunications satellite because he's like, I could bounce radio waves off of the moon and then send it to the other side of the planet. Well, I mean, the term space opera makes sense with Star Wars, but the term science fantasy I think fits a little bit better with Star Wars because Star Wars is not about a space opera in the same sense as like Star Trek is a space opera or Firefly is a space opera, because in operatic terms you would say like it's dramatic, it's bombastic, it's forgetting the name of the guy who did epic theater, but theater kid fail on my part. But it's that kind of that kind of thing. That those fit in those grand schemes, galaxy affecting stuff, or star systems changing the entire fate of species. And Star Wars is more like Lord of the Rings, but in space, or an epic tale, an ancient epic poem, but in space. Replace gods with super powerful space wizards and mystical essences. So that's why, I think space fantasy works a little bit better. Space opera would be like Guardians of the Galaxy. Flash Gordon. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, Gilgamesh. No, I agree, General Sal. I know that I am not a huge Star Wars fan. My wife is the Star Wars fan. I've enjoyed Star Wars. I don't follow it like incredibly deep. So, like when it comes to The Last Jedi, I wasn't that bothered by it. In fact, what bothered me more about The Last Jedi wasn't all of the shit that happened in it. It was the shit that didn't happen. It's the fact that at the end of the movie, nothing changed. And it was like, man, that's bullshit. Everything went wrong and everything changed, but then nothing changed. Fuck you. like, fuck you, this movie. But the movie was fine, in my opinion, because I don't follow Star Trek or Star Wars that deeply when it comes to that kind of stuff. That's just me. And I think that at the core, Star Wars has that problem because it's science fantasy, because it's an epic. A lot of the realities and internal consistency gets warped because it's less about the plot and more about the emotion. You know, what's important about the Return of the Jedi is that Luke is trying to save his father. It doesn't matter that it doesn't make any sense with this old crazy man is being like, kill your father and you will join me in the dark side. It's like, it doesn't make any goddamn sense. If he killed his father, he'd kill the fucking emperor too. Like, it's the emotional resonance of like, don't become evil, you know, fight against evil, but try to preserve your you know, try to like save, you know, your own the father you never knew, you know, do the right thing, it's a morality tale almost, and that's the details about Return of the Jedi don't matter as much as the emotion, and I think that's what makes good Star Wars. The Mandalorian is fantastic for the same kind of way, but it's doing more in a space western style. But space westerns or western works really well with science fantasy because western itself is much more of a character-based drama. So it's less of does the plot make sense and more of is there character growth? Is change happening? Is how are the characters dealing with the change in the world around them? Because westerns take place at a point of change. That's generally how the genre works, is that anytime there's a major shift, change between one point and another, that's usually where a western kind of story takes place. That's why almost all westerns take place after the Civil War, before the 20th century. Just because it's the cowboy, the last vestiges of the old world, and the trains, the vestiges of this new world, which is changing everything around them. Again, it's emotion-based. It's more about the character's development in the plot. I think the thing is that westerns and fantasy worlds tend to work well together. It's the same reason why westerns and samurai films tend to be the same, because samurai films tend to take place in a time when the samurai are no longer. Every samurai film that exists that's good takes place in a time period when the samurai are no longer valuable. They have lost. The war is over. The wars are over. It's a time of peace. What the fuck do these people who've been bred for nothing but war do? How do they function? Or their master is dead. They have no value. They have lost their way. They are people who no longer are needed. And that's kind of how westerns work. It takes place with people who are no longer needed. The main characters are always ex-rebels or cowboys or outlaws, people who are on the fringes of society who are now being kind of transformed. And fantasy works in this very similar way. I mean, think about Lord of the Rings. Like the central conflict of the Lord of the Rings is has a lot to do with the fact that humanity has to step into the place of the elves. The elves are going away. They're no longer, they're leaving the world, and humanity has to pick it up. And it's messy, and it's a time of change and conflict, and people are getting caught up in that change and conflict. And a lot of fantasy stories are like that. Like, I would argue that most fantasy stories are like that because it creates interesting drama. Seven Samurai, the 42 Ronin or 47 Ronin or whatever, same idea. Now, generally speaking, all good drama takes place in time of change, but you don't need, like, cyberpunk, for instance, doesn't need a huge change in society because with cyberpunk you're exploring the fucked up society that exists. Horror, same way. You're dealing with like an unstoppable killing machine, an unknown force that's trying to change the world. It's mostly action and adventure that require this kind of dramatic changes happening. I think so, yeah. Kobo did something like that. No, Anxious, I'm talking about samurai stories. So, we're talking about movies. We're talking about, like, Westerns. Like, it's a huge exaggeration to say that the West was nothing but cowboys. That's not really the case. West was a lot more complicated than that. But when we talk about Westerns, when we talk about samurai stories, and often samurai stories would end up being turned into Westerns. The Seven Samurai got turned into the Magnificent Seven. Was it Rashomon? There was one that was about a samurai who showed up in the middle of a conflict between two sides and then ends up ending the conflict by himself, which is the basis, which was stolen for Fistful of Dollars, is a ripoff of that. A lot of them are very similar, and the reason why they're very similar is because the stories are often told from the times of transition. Many of the famous samurai stories are about times of change, and the samurai being caught up in this change. It is one of the reasons why a lot of samurai stories have been romanticized. Yojimbo, thank you. Yeah. Did Kurosawa do the one with Yojimbo? I know that a lot of Kurosawa's films, and I would argue that Kurosawa is the quintessential samurai filmmaker, but I would also argue that samurai films, or that samurai stories, modern samurai stories, are very similar. Sanjuro. Well, I don't remember if Yojimbo was the. He also did Rashomon, but I don't remember if Yojimbo was the story that I was talking about. I think the story I was talking about is it's either Korean, which would be weird for him to be a samurai because I remember it being samurai. Well, Tom Cruise's The Story of the Last Samurai is actually fairly historically accurate, which is the crazy part. A lot of people are like, oh, this is super offensive. It's like, not really. He did a pretty good job of explaining, like the movie did a pretty good job of explaining the time period, which is why Westerns, and it literally shows a Western turning into a samurai movie. But the conflicts of the change of samurai going away and society changing, and that kind of, in some Japan's sense, a very violent transition in the late 19th century. Yojimbo. I'll look it up real quickly for Sanjuro. Oh, it was Yojimbo. Yeah, it was Yojimbo. Okay, yeah. I remember that there was a remake of that, or a retelling of that recently by a South Korean film company, which was really good. I don't know how the fuck we got off on this tangent. This is supposed to be about Star Citizen and Galactic Historian. Talking about sci-fi stories, I guess, but, you know. in conclusion, I want to see more science fiction westerns. CIG, please. Give me the Magnificent Seven, but in space. Yes, but I would argue that the samurai stories and the westerns bounce off each other. That Kurosawa would take classic Japanese stories, mix them with westerns in terms of like cinematography at the time, and then improve upon it himself. And then I'll take this full circle. And then those films influenced filmmakers in America and in Europe making westerns. Who would then steal some of his ideas, his pacing and his cinematography and the story plots, and then make them into their own movies. And then also a little film school student from USC, him and his friends were very influenced by Kurosawa's films, and they used those visual storytelling and the style of storytelling to influence their own science fiction and fantasy stories, aka George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. They're heavily influenced by Kurosawa. And Lucas even says that if you look at the prequels, you'll see Yoda does this a lot. He rubs his head when he's thinking, which is a visual tick from the movie Seven Samurai, when one of the samurai cuts his top knot off and puts on the robes of a monk to save a woman who is being held hostage by somebody, by a crazy dude. So like he's like, I want food, and so like he dresses up as a monk to go give him some food, and he kind of puts it down and then tackles him and puts him to the ground because he's combat. But because he doesn't have the traditional top knot, he keeps rubbing his head where because it feels empty. That's the kind of visual style. And Lucas directly copied it. He talks about it all the time. There's another Kurosawa film, a later Kurosawa film that he stole directly, which was I think maybe even Rashomon, that was the influence for R2-D2 and 3CPO. C3PO. Yeah, the Hidden Fortress. Thank you. It was Hidden Fortress. You want a helmet shaped like a cowboy hat? That's in the Hidden Fortress. Okay, yeah. I like Kurosawa. I haven't seen all his films. I've only seen Yojimbo and Seven Samurai, but I watch Seven Samurai probably once a year. It's really hard to watch, though. Not because it's bad, but because it's insanely slow. Like, it's difficult. You have to be in the right mindset to watch it. You would not do well with modern audiences today. You'd have to add more conflict. This. All right, guys. We've been doing this for a while. Thank you guys for hanging out with us here tonight at the Astropub. If you did enjoy this, hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button. If you like this on YouTube, hit that like button. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., we are going to be doing not a live stream, but it's going to be a premiere of episode 1 of the Jumptown Wars. This is a background to the Jumptown Wars themselves, because it gives you the lore background. It is something I've been working very hard on. I think it's pretty good. It's probably one of the first times I sat down, made something, and went, I think this is good, and I think people will like it. Those of you who've seen the previews, I think mostly have enjoyed it. It's not perfect, but I think it's good. So if you like lore, if you like Star Citizen, if you want to know a little bit more about the Stanton system, please come and watch it. Whew. Have a good night, guys. Love your faces.